I'll add the Here's my chat here. I've lost my chat somewhere in my mini screens.
I know you guys are already live. Oops. Yeah, so we are live already for everyone who's in the Zoom chat.
Yes, we are live already for the Zoom chat, and we are now live on Facebook. And Mark says we're coming in clear as a bell. There's not many of us yet, Mark. We'll see how it goes. And Liza, I just dropped the Facebook link in the chat if you want to grab it. And that's just my work Facebook. And you shouldn't need to be my friend to see it. You should be able to open it up automatically. And I'm going to minimize that on my screen because I don't think I need to watch it. All right. And well, we're getting more people. We're up to 12 now, plus us. So welcome everyone. It's Kathy Jones here. We're just going to give it a few more minutes before we begin. But I'll start by putting up a little poll that everybody can complete. And just tell us a little bit about yourself. We'll give this until a couple minutes, like 7:31 or so, for people to complete. Hi, everybody. It's Kathy back again. It looks like the number of people are building, and it's 7:30 now. Let's just give it another minute for the poll, and then we'll get started. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box or the Q&A box. Okay, I think it's almost 5 minutes for the poll. So what do you think, Larissa and Liza? Time to get started?
Yep.
Oh, somebody's got our hand up. I'll leave those. Do we have a question, Larissa? If someone has a hand up. I'm going to close it out so I can't even see it, and you can look after it.
Kathy, I can't see the Facebook live feed. Is anybody online that can see it and can just give us a sign that it's up and running?
Now it does have a 14-second delay. Now I just pulled it up and I see it in front of me here.
I was able to pull it up on my phone, so.
Okay.
So it looks like it's working.
Okay.
It's a tough one to tell with the live feed there. Now,
Larissa, you might need to keep an eye on that because I can't seem to get on.
You bet.
So, anyone who's on or off Facebook is supposed to be able to see it. That's about the best I can do. Now it looks like Dale Smith has seen it because he's liked it already. Now, can you guys still see my presentation? All right, I'm going to end the poll and we should get going. Does that sound good, everybody? I'm going to. So I will. Right, so where am I here? Welcome everybody to the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey webinar. I'm glad you are all able to make it. This is Kathy Jones speaking. With me here today to help out is Larissa and our Forest Birds technician, and Liza Barney, our educator for Birds Canada. Well, they've been nice enough to assist me with working on the poll. If anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and tell us any questions you have, or use the question answer option that we have in the system. Larissa and Liza, I'm counting on you guys to tell me if there's a problem because I don't see a view of exactly what you guys all see. A couple of housekeeping items. If you're watching on Zoom, we have you all muted, and let's keep it that way. We also advise you to close any unnecessary programs. Now, there's enough of us, I'm even going to suggest don't try to follow along on nature counts when we do the sign-in and stuff. If all 30 odd of us get on nature counts at the same time, guaranteed we'll crash the system. Use chat box for technical questions and if you want to introduce yourself. And Facebook, we're live on Facebook. Hopefully it is working. That has a 14-second delay, but if you have any questions, you should be able to put it in the comments. Now I'm going to minimize mine so that everybody can see what's going on. At least one person's watching it on the Facebook display. So the other thing I wanted to mention is we had a lot of really good questions regarding what people wanted answered. I don't see us getting to them all. So whatever we don't get to, we will send the PDF of our slides later to whomever wants them, and we can give them to you that way. So time is a little tight because we have much to cover. So I just wanted to spend just a second making sure we're all on the same page about what is the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey. The Canadian Lakes Loon Survey is a long-term monitoring program. We look at population monitoring and we look at breeding success of the common loon on Canadian inland breeding lakes. We don't really monitor the population of the lakes, but we get an index of reproductive success. And that is the main component of the survey. We track pairs and chicks that you see in your area, in your lake or your lake section annually. What else do we do? We have a few other components that we do as well, but that is basically what the survey is all about. And it's designed to be done in conjunction with your other activities on the lake. Like if you want to spend all summer looking for loons, go for it. But the survey is really designed so that you can do it in addition to your other lake activities. What else do I have to share with you? So that's basically it for the program. So our agenda tonight is fairly simple. We're going to discuss the new Canadian Lakes Loon Survey website, and I'm going to try to do that live from the website. We're going to discuss where you find your resources, how you do data entry, and then there's going to be an interactive question and answer session at the end. So let's start by going to the survey. And we're going to start at the main portal, which is called from the Birds Canada webpage. And I'm just going to switch the page I'm sharing with you here. And this is what, I hope you now can all see, I got to share. I hope you can all now see the web page for the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey. And this is the new web page that was developed this spring. And there's several nice features here. First off, right at the main page, you have the fact sheet, so anybody interested in volunteering can learn about the program. You have access to the volunteer portal, my contact information. Can people see, Larissa or Liza, can you guys see my mouse when I move it? There's also listed resources to help you with loons, Those are more for associations. There's also information on loon nest platforms, as well as some reading materials. So let's move on to the volunteer portal, because that's the main topic of conversation for today. And the volunteer portal is a pretty cool system that has been set up, and it is part of Nature Counts, and it's part of the Avian Knowledge Network. So that means it's a really big system that a lot of data is being stored in. And Denis Lepage programmed a brand new data portal for us that in many ways works just like the old one, but hopefully without the little glitches and things like that were in the old system. We're asking everybody who's participating in the program to register in this system. And why is that? Well, right now, the program no longer is tied to donations and membership fees for Birds Canada. So this is the best way we track surveyors. So we ask people annually to go on, register, sign up for for permanent use of the site, and sign up as well for each annual survey season. There's some nice options here I wanted to point out with you. First is the homepage. Every once in a while, the system just kind of gets stuck somewhere. Just remember the homepage. If you hit on it, it takes you back to the system. The other one is sign in and sign up. Most of us will be signing in. The other one is, if you scroll down, we have a section for new and potential surveyors and a section on conducting your survey. Now, a couple things I wanted to point out here with this one is that there's no customized information here and it doesn't give you login name here. So that's two things that clearly show that you're not signed in yet. So let's try and sign in here. So when you sign in, you just click on the button. You put in your login name. For many of you, if you've been in the survey in the past, we ported in your old Canadian Lakes Loon Survey account ID information. And so that is what you would use here. And you just sign in. And when you sign in, you get a thank you. You're already registered for the season and something that customizes the site. It also says whether your login name at the top. So those two great ways of knowing that you're on. At the bottom as well, it gives you the opportunity to adjust your contact information. What's very important. Now, some of you are thinking, well, hold it. I don't know if I have a Loon Survey account or not. So how do you tell if you have a Loon Survey account? I recommend if you have any past involvement with Nature Counts or Birds Canada data entry or the Canadian Lakes Loon Survey, you begin by trying to see if you have a account. And the best way to do that is to use the forget your password option. So if you go in there and you put in an email, I'm just putting in a fake one here, and you click on it, it will tell you immediately if that email is in the system. No, there's no login name or email of that name in the system. So say I think my login name is 1140459, and I look for that. Again, it tells me that there's no login in the system. But if I ask it to send it to an existing email that I have, if that email is in the system and you hit reset, it will send the email to you. And I'll just show you what that email looks like. I'm just going to have to share a different page here. This one, okay. So if you see here, you get a login link like this. And the first thing it tells you is your login ID. So just by clicking on that link, you didn't have your login ID before, you have it now. It also tells you that this email is only good for 30 minutes. So you have to be fairly quick at using it. And it gives you a login place to, and it gives you a link you can use to reset your password. Now that was the wrong one. So I have to use this one because they do grow bad. Now, and this is what happens when you're doing online stuff live. Things get out of order. So I got to come up with my latest one here, which is not today. And anyways, when you click on that link, we'll try that again. And we go in here and we'll see there's a new email. And we click on that, it automatically comes up and you can enter a new password for your site. And there you go. You should be able to get in. And you can know you can get in because you can it says you can log in now. So next you can do, you could sign in. We know that it was, what was our login? We can go back, grab a login. And I should share this page with you. What page are you guys stuck on here? Okay. Up. And classic for me, I never remember my passwords right. So now it looks like you've gone nowhere, right? And you're wondering, well, did that work? But if you look up here, you will see that the right login name's there. And if you click on the home page, it takes you back and you see everything you need. Now there's a feature in this particular login that wasn't in the last one. This is called the annual pop-up. And every year at the beginning of the year, we're going to ask you what kind of survey materials you want for that year, whether you want a paper kit or an online kit. Choose whatever one you want and sign up, and it's gone. And so you'll see that once every spring, and once it's gone, you won't see it again. That helps us, even do that for 2020, as that helps us track who's doing what this year. All right. So next, what's the difference between signing in and signing up? Signing up. Signing up is what you would use if you are on Nature Counts and have never been part of the Loon Survey before, so you don't have a Nature Counts Loon Survey portal component, or if you've just never done online data entry for the Loon Survey at any point in the past. So it looks pretty similar. You go to sign up, and it takes into your login name. Some things to remember here is you want to make sure your login name is memorable. It's going to want you to fill in first name or last name. I'm not going to do it here. It's going to want you to confirm the password. And it's going to want an email. It's going to ask you about your e-news and what privacy rights you want. And then down below comes the important stuff. It asks you if you want to become a participant and that you agree to the terms and conditions of the project. And the terms and conditions are up. And they tell us what is expected of the volunteers. So you'd say yes to that. And the other thing you want to say is, I'm not a robot. Now, the other thing I want to note here is you want to complete all this component of the website, predominantly because if you don't, you'll regret it later. When you do the data entry online, it requests that you have a full address on file. So if you do not have your profile complete, it will pause until you go back and complete your profile. That's just a little glitch in there that we have set up because we have learned the hard way. It's important to know our volunteers' contact information at all levels. So anyways, I'm going to hit yes, and you're going to see a lot of errors suddenly appear here. Yep, there you go. Now, a couple big errors to mention here. This one about if you're trying to save a data form, that's just a generic error it puts up every time. And it just means check all your fields, make sure you left nothing blank. It's telling me that my login name is chosen already. If that's your favorite name, it may be you. If you chose something generic like I love loons, somebody else might be using it. Another big one is the fact that says your email is already attached to another login. That means you're already in the system. If you're a little lost and you can't find yourself in it, give me an email and I can help you track that down. But if your email is already in the system, you should be able to do a password reset and get back with it. It tells me it wants my first name and my last name and my volunteer address, my email address. So that's pretty much the way it works. So let's go back in and sign back in so we have the system running here. Oh, this is an interesting point that I want to show for you as well. And I'm going to have to find it by going through my profile, I believe. I wanted to point this feature out down here to everybody. If you're part of a lake association or part of a group that surveys a big lake together, this is a brand new feature that a programmer put in that I think is really cool. If one person is managing the program, you can share the lakes linked to you with the other volunteers that you're working with. So say your Loon volunteer manager goes in and in their own data account, make sure they have links for every section and every lake they want surveyed. Then what they do is they pop an email out to all their volunteers and say, hey, register to the Loon Survey volunteer portal and send me back your login ID. They can add the login ID here. Let me see if I get this one right. And then add that login ID to the system. And that one didn't work, but there it is as well. And that means at this point, 2 other people can look at the same list of links for lakes that I have. And it helps you make sure that those lake sections are consistently used year to year. So it's a really handy system to keep everything up and running properly. So finally, to identify, we've gone through all that. We'll get back to the home page here. Oh, one other point I should mention about this, because it frustrates people. You're going to see down here, every time you go into the profile, it asks you to confirm your password. That's just a safety feature to ensure that it's you in the system. So just make sure you confirm your password every time. It might mention something about resetting the password. You can use the same password in that system. You just have to confirm it whenever you go into the protocol of the profile section. All right, now that we have that set up, what do we need to know? We have learned that the yellow pop-up and having your login ID tells you you're in the system, and that the pop-up changes on the time of the year. We know that you can access either through the profile for your contacts, or if you want to, you can click down here on contact information and find the same situation. We can also find our Canadian Lakes Loon Survey information. So if all you want is to get your instructions and print your forms, you do not have to submit data online. You can just go into the conducting your Canadian Lakes Loon Survey part of the system, print your COVID restrictions so you can read them, look at the printable instructions and the printable data form. That's all you have to do. You do not have to submit data online. That option is for you to choose. We're happy to enter data for you. In most years, we will still be sending paper kits. That just went by the wayside because of COVID-19 this year. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to look into logging in data or submitting data. But before we move to that, I'm going to ask Larissa if she has any comments or questions that we need answering. And I'm going to go back to change my share here. I'm also going to ask all you guys a question. Emily, who was not able to be on the chat, asked what the best time to observe loons were, dusk or dawn, or how's the best place and when to survey them. So I thought I'd put that out there, and you guys can add it in the chat or in the Facebook comments, and we can summarize that later. Larissa, do we have any questions we need to answer so far?
Yeah, we have one here from Kat Graydon. You might have answered this already, but she says, I used Laurel Ironside's ID last year for the Loon Survey. Can this be added to my account?
Actually, no, it can't, Kat. The reason being that ID is associated with Laurel, I think you said. So you need to have your own ID and your own login. That doesn't mean you can't survey the exact same survey section and lake that she does. You just have to create those links yourself. The ID goes with the person, not with the the survey section, I should say. Now, if in the past, if this had been set up last year, Laurel could have set it up that where she logged in and she had told you to create your own account, and then she could have used that option to give you access to all her links. But I believe she's no longer surveying, so we can't move that way through. You're going to have to find the lake yourself this year, if it's not, since you didn't have the data collected under your name last year. Any other questions, Larissa?
One here, I did answer it, but best to get your opinion on it. RG Rush Cow. Okay. I tried a new password that was sent to me a few minutes ago, but it doesn't accept my email address or username, which I thought was RG Rush Cow.
Well, that's something we'll have to resolve. You send me an email, RD. Your username is something I can look up for you, or what you can do. You can use your email to try to access that user ID and find that out for yourself. But that's something, it's not really good time to open that up on the system right now because I'm getting into your private information and that's not fair to you. And any other questions, Larissa?
I think Kat has said that I guess for some reason she was told to use Laurel's ID. She could follow up with you later.
Yeah, just make your own ID, Kat. Laurel's is connected with her name, so it won't work unless it's specifically for the lake association. And connect yourself back to the lake that you were surveying. That's pretty much the only way it's going to work correctly, so that the data is connected to you in the future. Don't worry about. That doesn't mean if you want to access all the data on the lake later, that's not a problem. You can get all the data on that lake at some point if you do a data request. It just will associate that particular person's name with their work and your work with your name. Anything else, Larissa, or should I go over our poll?
No, we're good.
We're good?
Yep.
I don't know if you can see the poll, but I will go over the results with everybody. Is there a way to show this? Oh, share results. Let's try that, see if that works. So I'm hoping you guys can see the results. So it looks like the majority of our people have been surveying 1 to 5 years. We have a few that are 6 to 10 years. Now we have one person who started with the program before I did, and I know you're out there, Dieter, and I'm hoping Marlise is with you, and I'm so glad you're still with us, and welcome to the webinar. And I just told everybody who you were. I'm just so delighted to get the opportunity to work with this couple all the time. They've been with this program since its initiation. So every kudos to those guys for sticking with us all this time. Other information we have here. Have you used nature count systems before? Most people have not. That's not surprising. It's more used with our regionalized programs. Not sure, fair enough. It looks like most people have not tried or have not succeeded with getting into the portal. Well, we had 10 are already submitting data, so we're all over the place. 10 are submitting data. The other half are either not there or halfway there. So hopefully the information I share here will help. Some of you may need to have a few emails back and forth later. And I just wanted to see what people thought about loons being in trouble. And again, it looks like that's all over the place. It's so hard to tell in Canada how our common loons are doing. We still see lots of them, even though we see with our data reproductive success is going down. Now, the catches with this species is so long-lived. A decrease in reproductive success may not be noticeable for a while. And we're just going to have to wait and see how this falls out. I am one who truly believe that we should try to keep our common birds common. So anything we can do to help this species and the other ones that use the same habitat they're in is in the best interest of Canadian lakes and Canadian ecology. So that's it. Before I move on to the next session, do you have any questions more that we have to deal with, Larissa? Or should we just move on?
You could just move on.
Okay. All right, so next we're going to talk about conducting your survey. And we've already gone over that you don't have to submit data, it's your choice. I want to make a point of mentioning that the protocol is very available. I'm going to put it back to my other page now. The protocol is very available, so just print it up and make sure you read it regularly, ideally at least once a year, because that will remind you all the little things that it's easy to forget. Now, I'm hoping that you're over and seeing the you're seeing the online data page again. And we're going to talk about how to use the data system. Now, the data system is set up in the process where it's a current year data is you can see only. Right now, you can't see past year's data. And we're hoping to have a mechanism at some time where you can get a hold of that data, but that's part of the next stage of the programming. So we're not there yet. But every year you need to create a form for the lake that you surveyed and to enter the data for that lake. So here's my system. And so when you sign in the first time, you want to use the lower drop down because you're creating a new form for the current year. And a big catch is the form has to be in the list. So I can choose any one of these 3 forms and click on it, and I will automatically open a new form for data to enter for 2020. Up at the top, you can open a pre-existing form that you've already started for this year and enter data in it. Now that's really handy because you don't have to enter all your data at once, especially if you do a lot of lakes. You can set up the form and enter some of the data and then return to it as you collect more data. So let's show how it works to set up a new form. So we want to survey McDonald Lake, and it automatically takes us to the form. Now, what about, let's go back to the home page here. What about, for example, we want to survey Moose Lake in Newfoundland, and it's not on our list. What do we do next? Well, if it's not on your creative form list or on your existing data form list, it means you have to add that lake to your drop down before you can enter data. So it's fairly easy to do. You start by adding a lake section, and this takes you to a 3-page system where you can see 3 different options. You can add a new section, find an existing lake, or add a new lake. Now, step 1 is pretty much the easiest to understand. These are all lakes that you already work with, but other sections are associated with that lake. So you could go in and add a new section to Doodle Lake or whatever you have there. And when you add that section, let's go with Doodle there, and it automatically adds it to your drop down, and you can go in and choose it and create a new form. All right, so that's easy enough. We're not going to go beyond that right now with the form. So let's go back to the fact that we do want to survey Moose Lake. So the next step is, does Moose Lake exist in our existing database? This is really important. We have over 6,000 lakes and sections in the database, so we don't want to add ones we don't need. I should warn you that the lake number and section number does not work yet in the system. The programmer is aware of that and is working towards fixing it. But for here, you can choose the lake you want and enter it here. And some you could do something like Mud Lake and look for that, or Moose Lake and look for that. Now, the catch with doing that is anytime you add extra words or potential spelling mistakes, it will get harder to find. So let's look for Moose Lake. Nothing is found. All right. So let's take off the moose. Let's take off this, the lake, and give another search. Again, nothing is found. And you're starting to wonder if there are lakes in Newfoundland in this list. Well, let's take a look there. So that doesn't work either. So let's try, if we just put an M, do we have any lakes in Newfoundland that start with M? And I think we've gotten ourselves into a, let's go to Ontario here. And here, we'll show you in Ontario that we have met the maximum number of lakes that we can pull up on the map. There's 250 lakes. So obviously you have to be something more clear than that. So let's try MAC. And that takes us to a smaller list. And you can go in and look at the different options and see what's there. Now, I have talked to the programmer. Right now, when you click on that, it doesn't bring up more detail. So, but you can click on that if that's what you want and add it. Or you can walk down, say you're looking for McDougall or McDonald Lake, you can walk down and find it in the list. Then you can say, okay, do I want this section or do I want a different section? So for McDonald here is a great example. If you click on this one, you survey entire lake. If you click on this one, you survey part. Now this is not a great choice because you don't know what 30% that is. But you know, for example, that you want to survey the northern half of McDonald Lake. So you would add a new section. And once again, it takes us here and it's in the drop down. We don't want the section 1. We know we don't like that. So we choose section 2 and voila, our form. When we come back and look at this, we still haven't found that Moose Lake in Newfoundland. So we know that it's not in our list. We know that it's not an existing lake in the system. Like we tested that out. We'll try it once more and double check. And it doesn't exist. So the next one is add a lake. Now this particularly step is so simple, it's a little scary. So you just put in the name of the lake you want to add and you hit create new. And it automatically takes you back to the section and it's add that lake to the list. Now, the thing to remember is that you haven't entered any details yet. During your data entry process, when you use that lake, you will enter the data there in section 2. So Larissa, it's probably a good time to ask, do we have any specific questions relating to accessing the add a lake process or looking at the lakes yet?
We don't have any questions, but just a quick question. If someone's having trouble retrieving some of their lakes for their accounts, should they just send you an email and you can work it out with them?
That would be step 1. So for most people, yes. If it's Marlies and Dieter, I think we're going to have to do a webinar together because we're going to have to get those links set up for them and I'm going to have to talk them through it. I did send Marlies recently a list of the lakes that they should connect with. So hopefully they will learn enough to get their links set up today. And if they don't, then we'll have to sit down and find a time that we can work together and get that done. Now, I should mention that for the majority of us, that list, there's a bridge that goes from our profile to the list of the past lake that's surveyed, but there's the odd person that bridge has been lost. And in those situations, they have to be rebuilt. And for most of us, it's pretty minor. It's just a few lakes, but for sometimes it's a little bit bigger. So I'm expecting you, when you go into your site, you will either see in your drop downs last year's lakes, or when you go into step 1 of add a lake, I'm expecting you to see your lake options in there as well. If not, contact me if you need the lake ID from previous years. So moving on. So this is a good time to, we've already talked about some questions. I have another poll, but maybe if we've already been 8:09, so maybe we should just move on to the next section and I'll give our second poll later. So Larissa, don't let me forget, but perhaps, did we get any good information about what's the best time to observe loons that people thought they find works best for them?
We seem to have almost a split between dusk and dawn. We have 3 for dusk, 4 for dawn. Jill said all day. 2 people said, one person said midday and another person said late afternoon.
So it's all over the place, basically. Depending on where, I would say it's when you're most active yourself by the sounds of it, but certainly dusk or dawn may be a good time to see adults for sure, because they're more active territorially at those times. Liza, I don't know, or Larissa, do we see anything on Facebook for comments?
I don't
Or
see any questions on Facebook, so I
cool.
think we're good to go.
All right. Well, that's good to hear. So we'll go on to the next bit, which is data entry here. So we have the screen open. Can you guys all see the screen? I'm hoping you can. And you'll notice that there's certain features to it. There's the home that takes you back to the drop down, and there's 7 sections listed. Now those sections listed relate directly to the sections on the paper data form. So if you fill out the paper data form in the field, you can easily fill this form in from it. Now, in the first section is your contact information. And just like on the paper data forms that we normally send you when we can, it's pre-populated with your information, and you just have to tell us if they're corrections. Now, there's one glitch with the system, or just one reality, I guess you would say, is the fact that you cannot enter and change this information there. You must go up into your profile to change anything on your address that is incorrect. The other thing to keep in mind is it's not going to let you move forward unless there's an address there. So if you have no address, take the time and update your profile, then come back into this page and move forward for data entry. So next, the other thing I should let you know is the data you're entering here is being entered right into the main database. There is no middleman. So what you tell us is what we receive. There is no finish, there's no submit button. Every time you navigate just by clicking on a new section, you save the data from the previous section. There is, in some sections, a next section button at the bottom. And in some sections, there's a save button. And that save button will also save the data. So whatever you put in here, we automatically have. If you discover in 2 weeks that you got something wrong, or you have additional information from your lake association, you can update the files. So that's quite a good option for this program. So we are working on Moose Lake, and we're on section 2. When we try to enter the information on Moose Lake, it was really easy to do, and almost too easy. So what do we do now to ensure that we have the right information? Well, we have to find information on this lake, and I'm just going to wing it and pick a lake and pretend this is Moose Lake. It's got to be on this side of this territory. We'll pick this one. So we're going to call it Moose Test Lake. And I'm going to just so to be deleted, so we all know that Cassie's fooling around here. And a brand new fix that you guys have not seen before, we now save where you put that blue dot. So not only can you take your coordinates here and copy it into here, but when we move forward, the location that you have mapped is saved and sent to me for data processing. And then I would say additional information. This is a hard one here. Just east of the Quebec border, large lake. And then I think I'm going to set a section, and I think I'm going to actually put my thing here and say that I survey the, we'll go with Northwest Bay for lack of a better term. So I'm going to put my section as northeast Bay, Newfoundland. And if you have this information, county and district, region, township, please provide them. And this fills in all these blanks that we have here. A couple questions that are very easy to miss. Did you survey the lake last year? Well, obviously no, because it's a new lake. Did you survey the section last year? No. By answering yes to these 2 sections, we know that at the most we have to correct data. There's no big checking of data that we have to do. A couple points to mention as well is that the county, district, region, those are a bit of an eastern concept. Townships are more eastern, ranges are, to my way of thinking, more western. And depending on where you are, you may have municipal boundaries that fall into one of these two things. County, district, region, I think is listed for a 3-letter term, but just put whatever the municipal boundary you're like in under township or range. What happens next with this is it comes back to us, and we review it, we check it against the Canadian Lakes the Canadian Lakes Geonames database, or the Canadian Geonames database, and we standardize all our lakes to that database. So we will review this. We may give it a slightly different coordinate than you've given it, and then we acknowledge it and we give it a finalized lake ID number. And then we move on to the next. So if I move on and move back, this is actually a big thing for us who've been using the system for a while. The dot is still there, the information is still there. And then we can move on to the next section. Now that's kind of a big deal. Larissa, does anybody have any questions about that section?
No, no one's asked anything specifically about it, though. We do actually have some questions. If you want to say those for later, or can I go over them now?
If you want to go over them now, we can try. Yep.
Okay, Janet asked, when she clicked on My Lake, a message came up. This error has generated an email that has automatically been sent to our technical support staff. That's a new one.
That's a new one. And that means Catherine, who is our programmer on this program, already has it in her file. There was some kind of glitch that happened, and she's already working on it. Perhaps Janice can put in the chat when this was. I've been rapidly emailing back and forth to Catherine for the last 3 days, and every little glitch I find she's been fixing. So she's been in and out of the programming a lot the last couple of days. So it may have just been timing. If you go back in today, it may not happen again, just because you may have been in there fooling around with, perhaps she was making our maps work right.
And RG Rush Cow has, I'm sorry if I'm messing up your name, has stated that they could only find 2 cranberry lakes, and only one of them in their system has map coordinates, so he's unsure if the second one is his.
Okay, so Barry and RD, I think you're in Ontario, but I'm not sure. We're going to go with Ontario. And well, maybe we're not, because I've got lots of cranberry lakes. All right, so you will see in some of these locations that there are lakes with no coordinates, or coordinates that are very simple. These are often sites that that are historical sections that we don't have enough information on, or brand new lakes. Like if RD set up his lake last year, I now have access to last year's data. Finally, we got that link working, so I can look it up and find out which cranberry ID he used last year, and we can make that a little easier for him. Ontario, so I've got several that you can choose from here, and perhaps it does exist. If you find out that we do not have coordinates for your lake, if it's not there on the coordinates, pop me an email and I will dig deeper into that. Is it dear? And we'll look into that later. It's pretty much something that has to be handled on a one-on-one. Chances are, if you're missing a coordinate, there's 2 things happening. One, we did not have enough information to establish the lake properly last year, or we just fell behind and never got it done. I will acknowledge that does happen. Or your lake does not have the right coordinates in the system. Either way, we can work on it together and sort that out. Anything else, Larissa?
Nope. No, I think we're good.
All right. So where were we here? Okay, we were on. I've totally lost my word. Return to data entry. Which form are we on? Moose. All right, so we went through section 2, and we're now on section 3. Now, okay, it's surprisingly, I should mention before we go on, it's surprising how many people don't tell us the lake name when they set up a new lake, and don't tell us the section name when they set up a new section. And those are two very important components for us finding your lake in the future. The other thing is, people say, well, what do you mean by section name? That's basically a description of the area that you expect to survey annually. Now, it may not be the same percent of survey, and ideally you want it to represent existing sections if you can. Otherwise, we get way too many sections in the system. But you have to just give us a description that we know where you are, like the Northeast Bay, all the western shoreline in between Hog Island and the West Shore, something like that, so we can identify where exactly you are. The other thing is distance and directions to the nearest town. Well, the fact that you can put that coordinate on really helps, but it also helps just to give us enough information for us to find your location. And that becomes more important the more difficult your location is to search normally. So when you are identifying your lake in the system, think about the fact that it's some poor soul who's never been there, stuck in the middle of Ontario, who has to do that. So any information you can provide on the links help. So I see we're getting tight on time, so I'll try to go through these very fast. A percent survey. Well, this one was a question that was asked. Isn't this redundant? Not necessarily, because you may say you are on a relatively decent sized bay. You may survey 20% one year and 25% another year, all depending on where the loons nest that year. You may survey up to 30%. So through time, we have learned to give ranges on the section. And in this portion, you give the percent of the lake surveyed, not the bay, but the lake surveyed. Another past question we have was a comment about you can't fix the lake information. You're right, you can't. You can provide it to me and we will review the data later and we will fix the lake, but you can't fix it yourself. And that's what I have for section 2. And 3, what is a percent surveyed you use on a very big lake? I always just set it to 1%. If you really think your lake is too big, you can't figure out the percent survey, 1 is a standard that I use. It just keeps life easy. 1% is the for large bays or for a very small section on a really big lake. And later, well, this is less important for our main reproductive success analysis. This comes into play if we do a more local analysis, or if somebody is interested in learning how the loons are doing in their area, then we want to make sure we know exactly how much proportion of each lake is being surveyed and know if we have to merge data from matching pairs in and things like that. So it's pretty important for that purpose. So I won't go over the loon survey data in too much detail now, but I'll show you a couple cool things. First off, for your large lakes, if you put an 8 in there and say save, you will now have space for 8 pairs. A couple other things to note is that dates relate to the number of literal dates on the calendar you are on the lake that month, not how many days. Like, it doesn't have to be 8 hours of survey, it's just the occasions you've been on the lake that month. So for example, in June, you've done 20 dates that you were on the lake. Adult loons is the maximum number of loons that you see during that month. So let's say there was 8 loons C. Now, mated pairs relates to the number of pairs you believe were residents on territory during that month. So we're going to say that there's 5 pairs. Now, the next question, people say, hold it here. You've got 8 adults and 5 pairs. What's up? Well, it's particularly in June. You may only see one residential member of the pair because the other one's on the nest. But you know that that particular pair is on the territory. So you mark them down as a mated pair because you're pretty sure you had 5 pairs in total. Now, in July, you may have surveyed 10 days. You had some visitors come in. So you had 15 adults and you still had your 5 pairs, and that's how that works. Just for the maximum percent number of young seen. So that means you put in the greatest number you've seen at any date during the month of June, the month of July, and the month of August. So, and that could be none. If you really don't know, use a question mark. Telling us you don't know is better than telling us an answer that you're not sure of. And so far, you put down the number of chicks you've seen. And the same thing with July. Now let's talk about maximum number of large young. You'll read in the instructions that maximum number of large young is based on 6-week-old young. So if you have a hatch at a normal time, which is right around the opening of right around Canada Day weekend, they will happen in August. In some areas like BC, that happens earlier than August. If it's a late hatch because it's a renest, it may happen later. So still put down the maximum number of large young 6-week-olds that you see. But if it's not in August, put a comment somewhere in the box. On the next page is a comment box. I'd also want to mention that that you will have stragglers that come into the lake after the season. So you want to keep an eye on that 6-week age. If you suddenly have 12-week-old young show up, they're not from your territorial pair. They've come from somewhere else, and you would not add those to your list of chicks. All right, what's next? Section 5 relates specifically to nests that you find or know exist. We don't want you to go out and look for this. It's just put there for platforms or if you know there's less in the nests in the area. Section 6 is something that our volunteers told us they want to provide us. And that's personal watercraft activity. And it's just whether you see occasional or a lot. And there's definitions of those on the page. Right now, we know there's an impact of watercraft, not necessarily personal watercraft with loons, but it's very difficult data to tease out. Finally, section 7 relates to other birds you see. We asked for information on double-crested cormorant. This again is what volunteers ask us to collect. At this point, we are not seeing impact on double-crested cormorants and loons. As for the rest of the list, first off, some of you may use eBird. If you use eBird, don't worry about this list. If you do multiple sections of the lake, you only need to do one of these for your lake. And only report the birds that you can know are there or are not there. If you can identify a bird, account for it. If you can't identify a bird, don't worry about it. And keep in mind that this is optional. You do not have to do this if you don't want to. So that was really quick, but I wanted, and we're already at the hour, but I wanted to give you guys a chance to respond if anybody had any questions on this, go into some of the questions and answers. Larissa, do we have anything we need to respond to?
We have a few questions here. Janet wants to know if she found out from a park ranger that a baby loon had died in September. Are we wanting to know this information?
You can always tell us if I like to review those, but as part of the data, we can't do much with it. We just record it and post it to the system. It's not a bad thing to look into your local community or contact the Canadian Cooperative Wildlife Health Center and see if they can do an autopsy on that bird. But really at that stage, there's not much we can do with the data. We know that the majority, if the majority of loons that live to 6 weeks of age on an inland lake are likely to fledge off the lake. And right across North America, this reproductive success calculation is based on that. Any other questions?
Yeah, a similar one Mark asked was that if they know their loons have failed by mid-July, can they complete their data?
Oh, absolutely. It is so important to have those negatives. So you fill out the form. If you don't see any chicks, you put down 0 all the way through. Sadly, too many people don't tell us the negatives. And to get a true picture of how reproduction is going in Canada, we need all the ones that hatch, we need all the ones that grow up, and we need all the ones that no longer exist. So if there's a failure, definitely tell us those zeros. Those are very important.
And another question is, how long is like a survey? If they scan the lake for 5 minutes, does that count as a survey, or do they need to spend a certain amount of time?
It all depends on the lake. You need to remember that this is designed predominantly to be done with your other activity. So it all depends on the lake, the size of the lake, the size of your area you're surveying. If you are confident that you have seen all the loons that you have seen in your survey area, you're done. I qualify that with saying if you're not seeing loons, take the extra time to look a little closer, because that makes a big difference there. So those non-answers should take longer than the answers about I have 2 chicks. If you've already seen your territorial pair, you already know how many chicks they have, you already know your answers, you don't have to go farther.
Yeah, we have a bunch of questions coming in now.
Okay, well, I'm going to put the poll up and then we'll answer the questions while people respond to the poll. And it's just what I'm curious about. I'm just figuring out how to launch it here. And we'll give them, they should be able to answer this in a minute. All right, so what's the next question?
Is the maximum number of loons the most seen in one day, or the total number of loons seen over the month?
Not total, it's a snapshot. So it's the biggest number you see at any point during the month. So if you see 5 on the 5th and 15 on the 20th, it's a 15.
Another one is, if nest locations are known, should I provide GPS coordinates?
We actually have that in the Q&A, but we can touch it here. We don't track them. If you want to get into that much detail, a great place to put the data is Project Nest Watch, which tracks into the Canadian Nest Record Scheme. But for us, it's not information we can use. We really don't need people searching for the nests. So don't worry about sending it to us. We have really no place to store it.
And someone asked also, should they report any renesting?
Yes, that's another question that we have, and we can go over it a bit more later. But basically, the way you would report it is you'd just report zeros, and then when you see chicks, you report 1 to 2 or how many chicks you see at that month. And then just add a comment on the section 5 with the breeding success information. It says, this is a renest, they lost their first nest for whatever reason. And be careful with for whatever reason you give. If you don't know the reason, don't put it down. There's a lot of supposition given about why the nest is lost without actual knowledge. If you do know and have proof of that, feel free to record it.
Okay, someone's asking about eagles. Do eagles take baby loons or even adults?
Ooh, well, that's a toughie. Yes, of course they do, because they're predators. It's a really complex interaction system. Do eagles take chicks? Yes. Do eagles take adults? Yes. Can loons defend themselves from adult eagles? Absolutely. There was a necropsy done in the eastern states this year of a loon, of an eagle that was stabbed to death by a loon. So it's not necessarily the eagle always wins these situations. Is this the biggest problem with loons? probably unlikely. We know that the big problem seems to be trauma, lead, and trauma and lead are the two big ones for now. I'm thinking, give me a few minutes and I'll come up with the third one. Yeah. So we got great answers on the poll. Do we have any questions? Any more questions before I move on, Larissa?
Yeah, we have 3 more.
Okay.
Someone is interested to know, how do I find out if any other volunteers are surveying the same lake?
I can't tell you. And the reason I can't tell you is because of their privacy rights and your privacy rights. I would suggest you make a note, contact your lake association. Many lakes have their own Facebook page, and just put the word out there. I'm surveying. If you have data, send it to me. If you're also surveying, let's get together and work together and use those local options. I can't tell you that more often than not, there are never 2 people surveying the same section. It is incredibly rare.
Okay, someone is interested to know, how do they determine what is a large young bird or 3 adults?
Oh, that's getting technical here. Large young versus juvenile versus adult. A large young is 6 weeks old. It's just starting to look like an adult loon. It's not quite. If you look at the, let me see if I can pull it up here. If you look at the, I make no guarantees I'll succeed at this, at the, what do I have that would show this? Just a second here. I'm pulling up a little image here. I don't know what you guys can see right now. Hopefully not this mess that I have open. All right. The adults have a different pattern than a large young, and they have a different pattern of a juvenile. Something to keep in mind, though, that you're going to rarely see second-year birds the same time as you see adult birds, because those immature stages are on the oceans. They don't stay on the they may stay on the Great Lakes, but they don't stay on the inland waters. The other thing to keep in mind that but first year young, when they get quite large, they have more of a scallopy pattern to their feathers, while the adult loons are more of a the checkerboard square pattern that they have. Even when they go gray, they still have a light tone of that checkerboard. And there is a great document out there, and I have it in my information here. And that actually might be the best way of pulling it up here. Enter ID of loons. All right, I'm going to share this. I'm going to end the poll as well, and we'll look at that in a minute. I'll share this here. This is an oldie but a goodie. This is Ron Pittaway's and Michael King's and Gene Iron's Loon ID for fall and winter. And here's a great example. You see the squares at the back of the specific loon here? If you can all see it, I'm hoping you can. Let me double check here. That is an example of an adult. So when we look at this here, the common loon is very squarish on the back. The first year young is very scallopy. And that's what the fall colors look like. When they're younger and they're at 6 weeks, they don't quite look that grown up yet. They're a little bit more fluffy. They look like a messy teenager when they're younger than that stage. Any other questions before we do the poll?
Yes, just one more. How do I report a failed nest on an artificial platform, but then the same loon pair having a successful natural nest later?
Just as you would normally, you would put down the zeros. Be certain you have the same pair. We have not discussed it, and it's something I bring up later, is we got loon invasions that we have to deal with. Be certain that it's the same pair. And if that's the case, you would report it as zeros, and then when they hatch later, you report 1, and then you add in the comments, this is a renest on a new nesting site, originally used a platform and then changed. But the question that answer was asked in the Q&A, and what caught my attention with it was, how do we know that was the same territorial pair? And you would base that on whether they're in the same basic vicinity, something like that, and consider things like, has there been major loon disputes at that site? Is it a long distance from the original nest? All those things may come into play, and you may eventually decide that, maybe it's not the original pair. But if you are confident it is the original pair, that's how you report it. Again, zeros until you have chicks, and then put your notes in the comment forms. Anything else, Larissa?
Nope, we got through it.
All right, now I'm hoping you guys can see my share of the results. And I asked people to come up with a basic idea of what they think is impacting loons. And it's all over the place. But there's certain things that come out very clear that people see are a problem. Climate change, trauma of some sort, predation, habitat loss impacting nest sites. That's the biggest one, and that's a fair concern. And habitat loss impacting food supply, and human disturbance during nesting. I think you guys have hit the big ones. And it's good to see that and to see what people are concerned about on the lakes. So I'm going to stop the share results, and I'm going to continue. It's after 8:30. If people want me to continue with the Q&A, I'm happy to until 9 o'clock. If they would prefer to see us log off now, feel free to speak up, or you can come back and watch the webinar later. Any thoughts on that? Perhaps I will continue, and if people want to say goodbye, they can just head out. Does that sound fair to everybody? Okay, so some of these have already been answered. So locating nests is not a big deal for us. They are not necessarily defined. That territories are very clear for the species, so we ask you to watch territories, and we don't really track the nests, so you don't really need to do GPS coordinates, and don't worry if you can't find the nest. The biggest thing is to understand to understand whether they're on territory or not. So how do you decide if they're on territory or not? That was another big question that I took from all the questions that were asked. Remember that loons are very loyal to the nest and the territory. They'll come back to the same area year and year. They'll try one nest in that area. If that doesn't work, they'll try another nest, then another nest, until they find one that suits their need through times. So they're very big on staying in that specific area. So if you watch your lake, you can quickly map and see where all the loons are in the lake, and you can get a really good idea how many pairs and territories you need to track. And remember that one loon often can represent a nest, especially in June. Remember, they're often separated by visual or physical barriers like bays and islands. And they need quiet nesting locations. You're not going to find them in those center areas with a lot of water. And when those territories fail, they will move out and about. So territories can fail for many reasons. We know black flies have been shown and reported as an issue in the US. We don't know how big of an issue it is here. We know that flooding of nests is a common occurrence in Canada. We know that predation, there's abandonment, and there's invasions by other loons that destroy the territorial pair in June and July. So that relates to a lot of the stuff we discussed earlier. Do we have any questions that kind of relate to that, Larissa, that I should answer right now before I move forward?
No.
Okay, so another question that was asked was, well, I do my survey in Georgian Bay area. Do others report on this area? And this is a very interesting question in the fact that we don't see a lot of loon breeding on Great Lakes. So you would think when you look at all these sections on Georgian Bay that we should, but we don't. And we don't see a lot of surveyors there for the same reason. They usually figure out after a year or two, this is just not great survey areas. So in 2019, we had one survey on Georgian Bay. In 2018, we have two. Now, why is this not a good survey area? It's because it's such open water. You get a lot of lake effect. Remember, loons can only handle 6-inch increase in water and a 12-inch decrease. So it just is not a great location for loons. And as I mentioned before, we usually call the lake survey size here 1% because really nothing else compare. Another question was, can I take observations from nearby cottagers? Yes, you can. You just need to be responsible to ensure that they know what they're doing and then they're not reporting 6 merganser chicks instead of loons and things like that. And you can amalgamate all that data and send it in a one data set as long as you're confident the data is accurate. I wanted to show you this image to show you how different lakes look. We've already discussed that Georgian Bay is bad for loons, but this is Lake of the Woods over here. So it's another big lake, arguably probably similar in size to Georgian Bay, give or take a couple hundred square miles. And there's a lot of sections on it as well, but these are active sections that you can get loons on, and that's because of all the convolutions on this lake. It really shows that you can get a lot of territories on it. Well, this bottom lake here before is very round. You'd be lucky to get one territory on it. Now for sections, Lake of the Woods again, each survey section would be a 1% survey area, and you'd want to identify that area fairly carefully to make sure that I can find it again. Well, on this very round lake, you could easily do 100% of the lake, or you could split it in two and say do 50% of it. But I suspect if you stand on one side of the shore, you can see the whole lake. So now we're going to discuss dividing up large lakes, but I'd rather approach questions that volunteers on the talk have. Is there anything else, Larissa, or should I just keep going?
You have one more question. If I observe tampering with water levels, e.g. digging trench to drain a marsh, do you know whom I reported?
Off the top of my head, no. It all depends on where you are. For example, if you're in Ontario in a conservation authority watershed, you'd probably report it to them. It would be a case of finding out who has water jurisdiction in your area, and that will change province to province, and talking to them about it. Very regional dependent for something like that. Okay. So the next question that I thought I'd approach, or do we have many people left online? Maybe it's time to stop, Larissa. What do you think?
We have about 14 attendees and still 3 panelists.
Okay, how many pages do I have left here? Oh, we're almost done, so I'll go through these. It'll be pretty quick. I just use this image here to show how we split up a lake. And basically what we do is we look for logical boundaries on sections, and you split it up that way. The other thing you could do is you could map where people are seeing the loons and figure out your sections on that. Just remember to think in the long term. What sections make sense for surveying this lake over the long term? And maybe in the first couple of years, when you get data, you sit there and say, oh, this doesn't quite work, and you need to adapt your sections. But normally, it's fairly easy to split them up based on ease of survey for each different separate region. Does it matter if I do not provide the bird list checklist? No, it's optional. Loons seen that may not be breeding, and why? That question was asked in the registration forms. That one's a tough one to approach. There is so many reasons why loons may not be breeding. Is this ever on your lake or just the lake? I would myself customize the answer to a long conversation with the person who's asking the question. So if that's your question, go ahead and call me. It may relate to anything from the conditions on your lake to perhaps a flooding or black fly event this year, or a change in pair. If it's a new pair or an old pair, they don't breed as well. Or just one of those years where they didn't have a good year to get started with. So there's many reasons behind that, and I would need to have a conversation with people to decide if it's an ongoing problem, a problem this year, and what events may have occurred around the breeding time that could have caused it. Well, this is a question we've already answered about two loon eggs on a man-made platform. And what I recommended was you put zeros for the months that you had no young, at the number for the young when you add. Remember that your 6-week chicks are likely to be late, and add a comment to that effect in your comments, and also make a point of saying that it's a re-nest. At the same time, they asked, how long does it take to replace a clutch of eggs for loons? And it's quite frankly seasonally dependent. So at the start of the breeding season, if they lose a nest, it takes about 8 days to lay eggs again. Later on, it takes about 19 days, and they will rarely lay into August. Usually they have at most 2 clutches a year and 1 set of chicks. I'm having problems signing in with my phone. Thanks, Larissa, everyone. She developed a fact sheet on how to do that. Would you be able to provide graphics and tips about identifying loons in Ontario? Well, there's only one loon to identify in Ontario. The document I showed earlier by Jean Arnn and Ron Pittaway and their crew is a great one to use. Hinterland's Who's Who has great information, and so does Cornell, all about birds. I don't see us developing this, but I will put it out there to communications. They know everybody loves loon stuff, so they may want to have such a blog at some point. Will my lake location data be filled in from other years? It is. It should be. If it's not, we're catching up. I truly believe no data was lost when transferring from the new system, and my early checks show that. We just lost some of the bridges that listed your name back to that data. I will just hold off on that question. It's a big one, and there's a blog on the website about nest platforms. And if this is your question about how far apart I should place my platforms, give me a call and we can discuss it one-on-one. And we'll consider that it. Before we sign off, Larissa, is there any more questions?
I don't see any questions coming up. No.
All right, well, I should make a point of thanking our sponsors. And for this particular survey, our sponsors are Bird Canada's donors and members. They cover all the costs associated with this program, so a big thank you to them. Also, obviously, the Loon Survey participants, because without them, we would not be able to do much for the survey, and we would not have the data to share. Liza, is there any final questions we need to add from Facebook, or is it pretty quiet?
If I'm seeing everything correctly, I have no more questions on Facebook.
And we managed to answer everybody's questions? Okay, well then we'll say goodnight, everybody. Thank you all for attending. And I'll make the slides available to everybody later.